Do you know what she said?
Let them eat cake.
Who took the bomb?
We're getting screwed, man. Every time we turn around, we're getting screwed. Oh, the revolution's going to be through podcasting for sure. That's the only way we talk. It's the little guys that take the brunt of everything. It's got to stop. Peasants, man. We're just peasants. Every one of us. You watch those old movies, you see the peasants in the background with the kings and queens walking around. We're those people. We're those people. Good morning, peasants. Welcome to another episode of The Peasant's Perspective. So glad to have you all here. Carlito and Tiffany from YouTube. Unusual that YouTube gets the first chat. Howdy, y'all. Carlit's on Rumble. Howdy to y'all. Pray the Rosary Daily. Good morning. And Frazier, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me bright and early today. It is another early morning in the Pacific Northwest, 6:30 a.m. Monday through Friday. You guys know where to join us here. Today, Ron's having a special day. Somebody in his family is getting married, so we'll forgive him for the absence. We'll forgive him for the absence for last week and this week too. Excited to have him back next week. So let's see. I guess we'll just wait a minute more. One of my favorite podcasters who I haven't listened to in years, Byron, his name is Byron York, and he has a little podcast. It's usually like 20 minutes long. It's like some news thing. Anyways, and this is the No Chit Chat podcast, and he jumped right into the story. And I've always wanted to do that, but it doesn't really work. It doesn't really work when you're doing like a live show. You kind of want to let people join before you jump too much into it. But at the same time, we don't want to delay too much. So we will get started with the simultaneous sip. And all you need for that is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tankard, a chalice, a stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's the unparalleled sip, and it starts right now.
Are you reconsidering her role here?
I don't know what you don't. You're fake news. Don't ever talk again. You're fake news. One of the worst in the business. Fortunately, nobody watches you.
Are you reconsidering her role here?
I don't know what.
That's fun.
You don't.
Oh, that's fun. That's funny. Okay, I have a sound check question for you guys. H.L. Young says, good morning. John Ataka says, good morning from Boise. Mata Easel says, great day, TJ. Oh, hi. Pony Boy, good morning. Glad you guys all made it. Okay, quick sound check. Can you guys
You're fake news. Don't
right now?
ever
Can
talk
you hear
again.
this? Okay, if you could hear that while I was asking the question, can you hear this? Put in the chat that you could hear it. If you can't, that's good news. I'm glad that you can't hear it, but I just want to know if that's the case or not. Okay, so yesterday I made a comment to my wife. I was like, I'm looking at, kind of checking the news, and I didn't spend an incredible amount of time online yesterday, in fairness, so I wasn't following things minute by minute, which I don't usually every day. But anyways, I was talking to my wife, she was like, there wasn't a lot that happened yesterday, and actually there wasn't a lot that happened, but there was at the same time, because this Trump administration is like operating at light speed. The Biden administration, I mean, things happened, but it was much more coordinated in their narrative. They had like thing every day. Trump is doing things at so many levels, and so many parts of the system are having an immune response right now, which is what we're going to talk about. So much of the system is having an immune response that stuff's popping up all over the place every single day. We could never really cover all the news stories. Doug Wyatt says, good morning, peasants. I'm glad you made it. Okay, so the White House put out this promotional video yesterday, and I thought it was a really good video. Quite enjoyed it, actually. And I just think I want to start today's show out with this, okay? The golden era is a choice. The golden era is a choice. One of the things that doomsdayers and naysayers and haters will constantly gripe on is the fact that the walls are crumbling, the system's breaking, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you're going to get swept up in it. And there's, so if it's all breaking anyways, then get yours now, get yours while you can. There's good advice in there, okay? But it's a very nihilistic place to be, that nothing matters, that nothing you do is going to change anything, so why make the effort? And that's a hopeless place to be. And Americans are not hopeless. Americans really do believe that we can achieve the American dream. It's embedded in us, this spirit of liberty. We still have strong families. Like, there's so much that's great about this country. And so the idea that we just have to be victims of all of this is not the case. We have a choice. So in everything that we face, you have to look and say, we have a choice. And there's an immune response from the peasants and from the people that matters. And if we do it right, if we choose, right, we will usher in a golden age. One of the challenges with America right now, and every single listener on the show knows exactly what I'm talking about, your vision of what America is, your vision of what the Republic of the United States of America is, and what that's supposed to represent, does not coordinate with all of your daily experiences. Whether you're a small business owner being overregulated by a despotic local government, whether you're a politician that goes to Washington to make a real change, Tim Burkhart, for example, or I even credit Marjorie Taylor Greene in some ways with this effort, right? Or a Thomas Massey, whether it's, a police officer that signs up to protect the peace and enforce the law and create law and order, and one day finds himself with a corrupt partner that wants him to look the other way while he commits crimes, right? Something you see in your world does not jive with your vision of the American dream. That does not make you a helpless pawn in what's going to happen. We really do have a choice.
We come to this place for MAGA to fight, 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 and win, win, win. Because we need that, all of us. The indescribable feeling we get when we hear the national anthem. And stand together, stronger than ever before. Under this administration, we're going somewhere we've never been. We aren't just watching history, we're making it. Rebuilding our country better than ever. A country where we don't do heartbreak, we do victory. An America that is safer, more secure, more prosperous. And any setbacks that stand in our way simply makes the comeback that much sweeter. Welcome to the golden age.
I love that. In America, we don't do heartbreak, right? In America, we don't do heartbreak. And I think that's the point, right? In America, we don't want to become the thing we hate. We really want to project our virtue onto others and have it stick to them, right? We don't want to project our virtue onto others and have it weaponized against us. So we have to be wise as serpents and soft as doves, right? We've got to go out and we've got to do what it takes to fix the system and to have that appropriate immune response. Some of the images that have been coming out of Spokane, Washington have been extremely devastating to me. I have lots of friends over in that area. It's an area that I really enjoy quite a bit. And so anytime any natural disaster happens, I mean, these events are large. When a forest fire rolls through a suburban or a city area, when earthquakes or tsunamis or tornadoes or hurricanes happen, the scale of the devastation can be absolutely, catastrophic. And if you're affected, even if the devastation is not widespread, if it's you that's affected, it feels like the whole world stops, and for a moment you're like, how can the world continue on when my life has been absolutely devastated? It's one of the questions of humanity, why so much suffering? And but at the same time, life is life. Life continues on. The sun will rise tomorrow. In fact, there's great hope and faith in that. H.L. Young says, I don't understand how any of the fake news channels stay in business. And H.L. Young says, still there. That's right. Okay. So this is an image coming out of Spokane. And look at this. This is a subdivision in Spokane. And they had about 60,000 people that had to be evacuated. I haven't seen the home count. We're probably going to see a little post here in a second. Talks about how many homes have been lost, but I saw a handful of videos that were before and after of certain neighborhoods that were destroyed. I mean, these were just suburban neighborhoods, just totally devastated. It's just overwhelming. And I want to point something out here. In any given city, there's only so many fire trucks. There's only so much, there's only so much ability to fight fire. And so one of the things that people are getting a lot of frustration with yesterday is as homeowners in Spokane were going through this. Look at this. This is devastating. So see that fire response vehicle right there? So apparently in this, the post here is, they called the fire department and the fire response, the homeowner stated the firemen drove up, took pictures and drove off as my house was on fire. They did nothing. That's very sad, but they don't have the ability to fight all these fires. So this person right here, I'm going to go ahead and turn down the volume on this person right here. They're, the house behind him is aflame. Their house is next. They're pulling out one of their classic cars from the driveway. Could you imagine being this family watching the house next door burning, knowing that there's no fire response and it's likely coming your way? House across the street is burning. These guys have their sprinklers on. That's what you have to do, man. So sad. So sad what's happening there. So they did find out this was not a natural disaster. No, it was not. It was not a natural disaster at all. It was, in fact, arson, it appears, or some act of vandalism. So Ari Hoffman posts this. He says, breaking, Aaron A. Farinacci of Spokane, 37 years old, has been arrested on suspicion of first-degree arson in connection with the Old Trails fire as crews continue battling devastating wildfires that have destroyed hundreds of structures and forced tens of thousands of people to flee across the country. He was arrested around 5 p.m. Monday and is being held on $1 million bail. He is scheduled to make his first court appearance Tuesday and has a previous felony manslaughter conviction in Arizona. Apparently, he killed his father. On Saturday at 10 a.m., a citizen who lives in the area reported seeing a man bending down along the side of the road near Uslid Avenue on Old Trails North. The witness told deputies they saw the same man again while driving home and contacted the Airway Heights Police Department. An Airway Heights police officer located the man about 1.5 miles from where the fire started, questioned him, collected his contact information, and released him at that time. Detectives with the Spokane Sheriff's Office spent the following days gathering evidence, building the case, and working to locate a suspect before arresting him on Monday afternoon. The fires have destroyed about 700 structures, many of them homes, and forced as many as 65,000 people to evacuate. Wow. So this is an instance where all this devastation, 700 homes, I don't know if there have been any casualties, totally destroyed by someone who has a criminal history, and apparently he's already been arrested and there's already been a motion laid on the court to have his mental health examined. The defendant wants his mental health examined. So it sounds like they're going to take some type of competency, mental competency kind of, I hate to say it, cop out, some kind of mental competency cop out. So not super excited to see that, but that's what we're going to get, I guess. So we'll watch that story develop, and my heart goes out to the listeners in Spokane. I know we have a handful of you guys, and wow, what a rough deal. So speaking of an immune response and making America great again, just like in this situation here, now every detail matters, right? When you're the one that's being accused, and I've sat in that seat, I've been the one on trial, I've been the one in the media, so I kind of know how this feels just a little bit. So you don't want to go out there and be like, oh, the manslaughter case that happened to him years ago has a connection to this today. Not necessarily. His life path might be a really messed up path, and maybe he wouldn't be on this path had that not happened years ago. But the two things don't necessarily correlate, because I don't know the details about the other. Is this a hate-filled kid, or is this just like, manslaughter's manslaughter? Any one of us today could, have the worst day of our lives and have an accident, and it could be called that. So we have to be a little bit careful till the details come out, and I haven't researched it, but apparently this person has a known history with mental health, which absolutely affects your, what I call the cause and effect thinking, right? It's the dominoes. If I do this, then this. You see this oftentimes with little children. They struggle with cause and effect, right? It's easy when you touch a hot stove and it burns you not to touch the hot stove. There's one domino there. Okay? There's one action. What's harder to teach children is that what you did this morning and then you got away with all day long, and now tonight when parents find out you're getting punished, they don't know that the cause of the punishment comes from their activities earlier in the day. That cause and effect. That's a more mature thinking, right? So when people struggle with mental health, a lot of times they don't intend to burn down 700 houses. They don't contemplate that. To intend it, you have to contemplate it. They don't contemplate that, right? That's the struggle there. So we will see. And unfortunately, that's very common. When I was in prison, one of the things that I wrote home about and commented to people at home was, in prison, you're surrounded by a lot of people. Like out in the normal world, the majority of people understand cause and effect. They understand, moment to moment moral good behavior because there's an effect to it. Okay. So there's that's there. The other thing is delayed gratification. Out in the normal world, most people can delay some gratification. We're often critical of our own society about how little we delay gratification, nowadays. That is true. And that might be contributing to some of the more bigger societal problems that we have. But nonetheless, when I was in prison, I saw that most people in there do not delay gratification, right? They don't have a lot of that delayed gratification ability. This isn't with everybody. This is just kind of like, it's enough that I noticed it and I wrote about it. And so you do see this, right? It's a small percentage of people that don't have proper frame of thinking that continue to cause crime after crime after crime. And that sometimes is just a product of nurture. That is just a product of life experience. That's a product of poor discipline. When I lived in Brazil, in Portuguese, they have a phrase for this. They call it mal educado, which basically means badly mannered, but they use the word educated. They're badly educated. They've been poorly taught, right? These are flaws of society and flaws of the family that show through. Then there's people that have a real criminal mindset. These are the people that have basically said, we don't care, right? We're just going to do what we want to do. And their motives vary, but they think criminally. Okay. So Donald Trump, like many other good people before, many wise men have realized, is that the vast majority of bedlam and malfeasance and crime is caused by a generally small percentage of overall people. And if you can deal with that small percentage of overall people, the overall level of law and order increases dramatically. No better example of this than what happened down in El Salvador. To my knowledge, and I haven't heard any rumors of this and I haven't studied it, but El Salvador didn't go on some type of inquisition campaign or, violent mass murder. No, they went and arrested criminals, gave them some form of due process, and they're still alive sitting in prisons, right? But he arrested, I don't know what the number is. Let's pretend it was 100,000, 200,000 active gang members that were causing 99% of the crime. And now El Salvador is one of the safest places to go and visit on earth, right? So Donald Trump understands this concept.
Crime is down 92%, maybe more. I want to get down 100%. The greatest statistic, though, that you have is that 2% of the people create 91% of the crime. You can really handle that. And we moved almost 5,000 people out. They're criminals, career criminals. We moved that, or in some cases, they're in jail. In some cases, they were so bad, they came in through Biden. They're so bad, we don't want to move them out. We want to put them in jails because we're afraid they're going to come back in somehow. Crime is down 92%.
Yeah, I believe I've actually thought that a lot. I've thought, do we really want to deport some of these people? Because I do know they'll just come back, right? And if they're criminals, they don't care about your rules no matter what. So, but what's nice about this, again, the golden era, we have a say in this. This is an immune response. As our inner cities break down, as there starts to be breakdown of law and order across the rural parts of the country, especially areas where methamphetamines and now fentanyl have, gotten into some of our small rural communities. As law and order breaks down, Donald Trump's presidency and the law and order anti-crime campaign is an immune response. Right? This is a choice that people are making. Overcoming election fraud, overcoming lawfare against people that were willing to put their name on ballots, overcoming the zeitgeist in the media narrative, overcoming intel operations and psychological operations, overcoming foreign influence operations and possibly even cyber intrusions into election apparatus, overcoming corruption, political corruption, as well as outright despotic corruption, overcoming all of that. There's a pretty good president sitting in the office that is really concerned about things that are basic, like, law and order and picking up the trash and enough electricity so you can run your AC and taking care of pollution, right? Like basic concepts, stuff like that. He's also very pro-business. This isn't like, everything he does is good or bad, but in a huge aspect, it is an immune response. It's the pendulum swing, right? Maybe Donald Trump is a little bit too friendly to big business. Maybe he's a little bit too friendly. But given the environment we've been in, where we've gone through 30 or 40 years of unfriendly business environments, can you expect anything other than the pendulum swing? Now, I have a say in this too, and how I allow myself to be affected by this. Am I going to ride the whale? Am I going to go up and down with the whale as it goes for air and dives down deep, right? Or am I going to set myself up? That's the choice we peasants get to make. So here's another example of an immune response. So this is a judge down in Florida, and the attorney general in Florida has moved to have the leftist judge Nancy Abdu impeached after she served as a director on the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center's litigation, while it defrauded America and funded the KKK. This is really significant, right? Going after the SPLC has now opened up the door to look at everybody who worked at the SPLC and to question their integrity, especially someone that was on the lawyer side, litigation side, did things like got discovery, worked with the FBI and law enforcement agencies to pass on their tips and their, terror heat maps and their open source investigation materials and all those types of things, right? Whoever's working on that is probably in the know about who's an informant, who's paid, what's been organized, and what not to turn over. I mean, guys, these attorneys get into things. There's a reason why attorney-client privilege is a sacred right, is because attorneys represent sometimes people who are guilty. Okay. And so they have to be able to see those things to mount a defense, because whether you like it or not, guilty people, even when they know they're guilty, still will go to court and say they're not guilty and put on a case. And it's their right to do that. Okay. An attorney general in Florida has moved to have the leftist judge impeached after she served as director. She was the director in the SPLC's litigation while it defrauded America and funded the KKK. Get her out of here. AG James Uthmeyer, in a formal impeachment inquiry request to Speaker Johnson and committee chairman Grassley, Jordan, and Comer, quote, "I write to request the initiation of an impeachment inquiry into Judge Nancy Abdu to determine whether her service as a top attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center warrants her impeachment and removal from the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit." When we talk about ethics and integrity and what we envision in a judge, and good gravy, we put up with a lot of corruption, don't we? Oh my goodness, we do. Still not as much as other countries. That's the crazy part, right? We're kind of the tallest midget in the room. So here she is working with the Southern Poverty Law Center, an utterly corrupt institution, utterly corrupt, just its entire premise of existence. Create the crime to profit and fundraise off it to the tune of nearly $1 billion. It's just, it's ugly. It's dirty. It's gross. To sit on an appeals court? Can we question this woman's decisions for right and wrong? I mean, I understand attorneys sometimes have to represent defense, guilty defendants on a matter of principle and constitutional right, but the Southern Poverty Law Center didn't have a constitutional right to fund hate and then fight it, and then not only that, litigate to make it illegal. It doesn't make any sense. Abdu was one of SPLC's top attorneys from 2019 to 2023. While the fraudulent enterprise was going on, she was the director of strategic litigation who created practice groups and oversaw litigation. The Orwellian lengths SPLC traveled to deceive its donors are particularly disturbing, given the extremist nature of the groups it supported, end quote. Quote again, Judge Abdu's potential knowledge of and involvement in SPLC's conduct necessitates an impeachment inquiry. A sitting judge should not be able to escape impeachment for wrongful conduct occurring prior to appointment that may have been concealed from the Senate and the public during the confirmation process. Your action is necessary to ensure that federal judges entrusted to exercise judgment in matters of life, liberty, and property are worthy of the public trust and preserve public confidence in our courts. Wow, what a good immune response. Now, what's going to come of it? I don't know. I mean, another strongly worded letter, I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll see. We'll see if it pops up in the news again. A judge was impeached. That would be amazing. When was the last time a judge was impeached? Can you remember? I can't remember. Every now and then a judge quits or resigns or gets fired when he's about to be impeached because he did get caught taking the envelope full of cash or something ridiculous, or they got a DUI or something ridiculous like that. But you don't see stuff like this. This is a real question of judgment, right? This is a real question of judgment. And can she really be trusted to sit on the bench? Because here's the other thing. When you are part of a criminal organization, right? Even if you're a tangential part, you're the bookkeeper, you're the accountant, you're the lawyer, you're, the delivery truck driver or whatever it is, you're kind of in on it, right? You're butter and your bread. You're kind of in on it. And if the whole shop falls, you have liability. So you think about a litigation attorney. Imagine her thoughts. Let's pretend she knew. Let's pretend she knew they had deep plants inside the KKK. Let's pretend she knew that Charlottesville was organized by the SPLC. Okay. Because, maybe they, I don't know, who knows? Maybe she knew. And a case comes before her where the SPLC says this person's a racist or an extremist or, whatever the case is. What's her bias going to be? What's her bias going to be? Is she going to go, oh, I got to suspect that because I know SPLC sometimes, called people racist that weren't racist? Or is she going to go, yep, SPLC is great. It's top notch, golden. It's part of my resume. It's a feather in my cap. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a difference there. There's two ways to approach it. So we'll watch that. I have my doubts that it will amount to much, but we'll see. Okay. So do you guys remember George Floyd? Right? Remember George Floyd, St. George Floyd up in Minneapolis, got kneeled on by a police officer and kind of started out the whole summer of BLM and riots and, we're on lockdowns and everybody has to wear masks, but racism is more of a public health crisis. So we can forego okay. So let's follow the chain here. I mean, because this was like the fever dream of 2020. I mean, it was just what is happening. Okay. So the news, the media. Now, in your little community, life goes on. Sun rises every day. You got to, take care of whatever. So a lot of America, one of the things I realized traveling around the country, going through the prison system, talking to people, like if you were in Missouri, COVID was like annoying. It wasn't the end of the world. The zeitgeist wasn't there. It's a bunch of farming, it's a farming community. Up here in Washington, it was 99.9% of people wearing masks, social distancing. Heaven forbid you stand too close to somebody. Businesses were turning people away. The sheriff wouldn't enforce anything, but businesses were banning people, having people trespassed, like it was nuts. It was a completely crazy world. So on one hand, they suspend the Constitution because of the threat of coronavirus. They criticized any kind of Republican or conservative gathering, whether it be a church gathering or whether it be a political gathering like a Trump rally, super spreader events. Remember those? But when it was a Democrat gathering or when it was a BLM riot, no, not a super spreader. That's just activism. I mean, racism is a way bigger public health threat than COVID. They were probably right. Okay. But it's not really a threat. That's the point. So what I'm going to show you here is a clip. And this is the first time I've heard this guy talk. So this is one of the officers. His name is Tou Thao or Tou Thao, depending on how you want to think about it. And he was one of the officers that was with George Floyd. And he's the Asian officer that's standing on the side of the road. So he did get convicted. He got sentenced. He went to prison and now he's back out. They tried to kill him in prison. Okay. Well, he did this interview and I thought it was really great. And again, this is an immune response, right? This is an immune response to corruption. This is that police officer who signed up to do good. And when he realized the system was being weaponized against him, rather than take the easy way, he took the principled way. Right. And he took the principled way based on his beliefs. And I just think this is a beautiful example for us. So let's take a listen.
Just me going to prison, I want to last 24 hours in general population until they try to have me killed. So it just I'm not surprised it happened to Derek. Obviously, there's people in higher places in government that would want us dead. It's because if we die, then the truth dies. So it's pretty obvious that that could be a possibility for Derek as well. So I wasn't surprised when it happened to him. There's people in government that would like nothing better than Derek to die, because everything goes away. The cover up just disappears, and there's no one left to expose it. So, I mean, I'm not naive enough to know that if I'm here talking and speaking, that they wouldn't want me to disappear as well. But, as going back to my faith, we're not worried about that. We know where we're going. So, but then we also have a task that we have to accomplish. And that, for me, is to expose the works of darkness, Ephesians chapter 5, and also speak truth. And oftentimes it's not going to be popular. I could have taken the easy way out and sided with the woke mob.
When you say easy way out, do you specifically mean accepting the plea bargains, getting the lightest sentence, just sort of like, let me just get through this process with the least damage possible so I can return back to my family? Is that what you mean by the easy way out? Or
the easy way out would just lie.
Okay.
Just basically lie and take the woke narrative and run with it. And you know what? It might not be I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here.
Yeah.
But if I would have went that way, who knows? I could have been the chief of Minneapolis. I mean, it's not far-fetched, just how it has become.
I could have been the chief of Minneapolis if I would have just, sold my soul. And I think that's the thing, right? Having been through the January 6th experience, and I'll just call it that, it's the January 6th experience. It's like you go on a cruise and you sign up for an excursion. When I went to January 6th, it was like going on a cruise, and then I had the prison package as one of the excursions, the riot package. So anyways, when I went through the January 6th experience, obviously you're presented with the opportunity to take a plea bargain. You're presented with the opportunity to take interviews from media. You're constantly asked questions like, do you regret going? Do you still believe the election was stolen? Things like that. And I had to take a really good hard look in the mirror. Do I believe this? Do I believe the election was stolen? Was I lied to? Did I get hung up on hype? Right? Because I reserve the right to change my opinion. I reserve the right to have new facts come to light and completely change everything that I know about any particular topic at any given moment. Okay. I reserve that right. And so I'm like, I could have been fooled. I've built a foundation on my belief system and how I've derived my opinions. And I've been very systematic and thoughtful in that and explored a lot of possibilities for whatever I'm thinking. But I had to look in the mirror, and I had to make a decision that I was not willing to budge on what I viewed as self-evident fact as far as election fraud, government corruption, et cetera, et cetera. So I picked my path. I picked my path to not argue, because it's a fruitless exercise. But I didn't take any deals, right? I went to trial, made a sitting jury, did the whole thing. Okay. But a lot of people didn't. There were a lot of people. I remember sitting with one particular gentleman, Doug. I think you might remember this person, sitting in the DC pod, and he came in. He was only in the pod for a short time, and he came in and he'd just taken a plea deal, and he sat in front of the judge and he cried about the election not being stolen and how Trump had lied to him and all this stuff. And his objective was to get a smaller sentence. He still got like a year or two or whatever it was. He didn't get a huge sentence, but he got a real sentence. And then he came into the pod and we had a discussion about things, not particularly attacking him or anything, just about politics and what we were seeing on the news. And he got real emotional and started crying. And he was like, I can't believe I said those things. I don't really believe it. I was trying to take the easy way out. Well, you put it on the record, man. So now the truth comes out. Election was stolen. COVID was a farce, all the stuff that we believe that we were literally persecuted for believing. Whether or not you want to believe we were persecuted for the actions that individuals took on January 6th, that's fine. But the dog pile was because of what you believed. A $50 ticket for 1,500 of the defendants would have been appropriate. Maybe 80 people should have had something additional. Okay. But for the most part, it should have just been a unruly crowd type situation. So anyways, absolutely. I very much sympathize with him standing on the principle. And it's like, listen, you have to speak the truth. Over time, the truth will come out. It's about being consistent and never staying on that. It's one of the reasons that I do this podcast, is because this stuff matters, right? It doesn't matter It didn't matter when I was a kid. Maybe it didn't matter. Federal stuff didn't matter. But after, I don't know, maybe it was 9/11. Maybe that was the big turning point. All of a sudden it mattered. They're in your pocket. They're listening on your phone. They're on your email servers, your computers. You know, in the name of advertising, they collect all your data. They spy on you, right? And the system's not perfect. Obviously, within the system, there's lots of corruption. And it's not just political corruption. Sometimes even people down at the low level, like just a special agent in charge or a special agent, say at the FBI, might do things that are just outright criminal. Like, for example, here, we had an FBI agent who turned himself in after being caught. FBI agent stole $1 million in Bitcoin and crypto. Patrick Stephen Yarrick was arrested on Friday. He self-reported. He returned the funds and he's been put on leave so far. He was a 9-year FBI supervisory agent. He was just a thief. He was just a common digital thief, right? At the end of the day, that's what his values were. And it's sad. It's really sad. We all struggle with imperfections. Like, nobody is immune from imperfection. It's really unfortunate when public officials have stuff like that happen because they violate public trust. You know, one of the things I've learned in my life is try to avoid things that you're going to fail at. You know, to thine own self be true. Some things you're not good at, some things you are good at. Play to your strengths. So there's another big thing that's been going around a lot in the news and in what I would consider the conservative ecosystem. Conservatives are interesting folks. Okay, we're really interesting folks. An interesting breed indeed. So on one hand, we have these set of values and principles, but we do a very poor job of applying them in the political realm. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example here. Let me remove my video from the stage so I can bloviate with you guys. So years and years ago, there were books that were written and they were well-intentioned. They were written by a single mother who was on public welfare, and she started to write a fictional story. And it was about wizards and a school for young wizards. And it was called Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling wrote this book. Okay. J.K. Rowling. She was trying to, put some values in the book, and it's just a fun story. It's Harry Potter. Most people love the Harry Potter stories. Okay. They're good movies. They're good books. In my generation, a lot of the kids my age, teenagers, were reading the books as they were coming out. I myself made it to the 4th book as a teenager. Okay. They're decent books. But there was a large segment of the conservative population that viewed those books as witchcraft. They viewed those books as an evil abomination that was teaching witchcraft and, paganism or whatever. And so they sued. They sued the school districts because they were putting these Harry Potter books in libraries. And ultimately, they lost that lawsuit. Okay, they lost the lawsuit on First Amendment grounds, on a whole series of grounds that essentially, you're trying to censor books that don't really have a public outcry outside of a specific, niche. So you can write a note to the school and tell your kids they can't read those books. It's kind of their attitude. Okay, well, fast forward a decade, and the LGBTQ movement saw that and they go, oh, now's our opportunity. You can't ban books from schools anymore. Right? The right to ban books existed, and they did ban books that were offensive and graphic and pornographic. They banned them. They weren't in elementary schools and public schools. But Harry Potter, that was a bewildering one, right? So they literally got rid of the school board and the lower level that's accountable to the people right to ban books, because clearly the Harry Potter banners didn't have good judgment. Okay. They wanted to impose their very stringent worldview on people who think Harry Potter is a benign story, including myself, by the way. Okay. If you're going to ban Harry Potter, you better hit, Lord of the Rings. You probably should hit Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, some C.S. Lewis's writings. You better hit every sci-fi book. Like, it's like, come on, whatever. It's crazy. There's probably books way more worse in the library existing other than Harry Potter, but for whatever reason, they picked on Harry Potter. Well, the LGBT people saw that and they started getting books published and put into libraries like My Two Dads and, Jenny Has a Queer Mom and, all these different books that are like offensive to society. I know pornography when I see it, says the Supreme Court Justice, right? That's pornography. So, but it's because of the fickle nature of the conservatives, kind of not really knowing where their principles actually lie, that opened the door to that. Now it's a whole new fight, right? Now it's a whole new fight because you can't fight them on just, well, the people want to censor it. Well, they took that right away, right? Now you got to fight them on other grounds. So people do that. Conservatives are kind of fickle like that. On one hand, we want law and order. So we are the ones, we conservatives, we are the ones that created an industry for things like flock cameras. Okay. Remember, it was the Democrats for years that were like all civil rights and don't tread on me and all that kind of stuff. Okay, not don't tread on me as much, but leave me alone. Let me do my business. Leave me alone. Let me be a hippie, that kind of thing. Don't impose your beliefs on me. Years and years, and very concerned about, drag nets and all that kind of stuff. It was conservatives that got things like flock cameras contracts and business, because it's great to find stolen cars. It's great to find, theft people. It's great to find carjackings. It's great to track down kidnapped kids and use the flock cameras. Awesome. But as soon as flock cameras got weaponized, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, these flock cameras are horrible. This is where it gets kind of tricky, right? So there was a Supreme Court case when it came to surveillance and your right of travel and your right of privacy and things like that. And this was an old case, and it's cited every day in support of things like flock cameras. Well, I'm going to play this guy's little video, and he's got a little mask on. He doesn't want to disclose who he is. I don't know why, but it's a very informative video about flock cameras. And as peasants, I think it's important for us to just be informed on the debate, kind of the full scope of what we're dealing with here. And it will help best inform the way we fight it. The way we lose is destroying private property, right? A flock camera does not belong to you. Just because it's put in the right of way doesn't necessarily mean it belongs to you. It's licensed to be there. It's private property. If you destroy private property, law enforcement will double down their efforts, and they'll try to make it impossible for you to resist. The only way you can resist then is absolute total societal resistance. That's a bad path. That is a bad path. It makes you an enemy to the guys with guns and the guys that have a monopoly on force and violence. So understanding this debate helps us fight better. So here's a great contextualization of what's actually happening with flock cameras, and we'll talk about how to best go about dealing with them. Again, this is the immune response. You want to usher in the golden age? Stand on your principles. Matters of fashion, swim with the current. Matters of principles, sink like a rock. I think Thomas Jefferson said that. So let's talk about flock cameras.
No expectation of privacy in public. Somebody has said that to you about these cameras. Maybe a cop, maybe your brother-in-law. They're quoting the Supreme Court, and they're not wrong. They just stopped reading too early. 1983, United States versus Knots. Police hit a radio beeper in a drum of chloroform. They followed the drum down public roads to a cabin. No warrant. Knots said that was a search. The court disagreed, and the judgment was unanimous. Rehnquist wrote it, page 281. A person traveling in an automobile on public thoroughfares has no reasonable expectation of privacy in his movements from one place to another. That's the line. That's where it comes from. It's good law today. It's the sentence every agency lawyer sends me when I ask them about plate cameras. And they're right to send it. It says what they say it says. Now turn 2 pages. Knott's lawyers had put a warning in their brief, and the court quoted it. 24-hour surveillance of any citizen of this country will be possible without judicial knowledge or supervision. 1983. They were describing 2026, and the court answered them. If such dragnet-type law enforcement practices as respondent envisions should eventually occur, there will be time enough then to determine whether different constitutional principles may be applicable. Wow. Dragnet. The U.S. Supreme Court picked that word, 1983. I say AI dragnet. The AI half is mine, and I'll say so every time. That sentence is a rain check. If the dragnet shows up, we'll deal with it then. 43 years. Same opinion, page 283. We have never equated police efficiency with unconstitutionality, and we decline to do so now. Efficiency was the whole point. They said it out loud. So the court wrote the trigger itself. Dragnet-type law enforcement practices. 116,017 searches on one city's cameras. I'm not a judge. Whether that clears the bar is above my pay grade. The bar exists. That's the part I can prove. So next time somebody hits you with the privacy in public thing, you say this. That's Knott's, 1983. Read 2 more pages. They called it a dragnet and said they'd deal with it when it showed up. It showed up. 6 more cases after this one, 6 more comebacks. Somebody said this to you. Send it back to them.
That's great. That's great. So that is so law enforcement efficiency. If your child got kidnapped, do you think you would sit and tell the sheriff, the FBI, the law enforcement officials that are trying to help get your child back, please do everything you can to get my child back, but don't use the flock cameras. Don't use the flock cameras. Do everything you can to get my child back, but don't use AI to scan, Snapchat to see if my pictures of my child have been taken and sent via Snapchat. Don't do that. Don't scan pictures for my missing child. Never would you do that. One of the realizations I had going to prison was we need prisons, because I met the people that are in there, and I don't want to live in a world where some of those people are walking on the street. I don't want to live in that world. So anybody who says, well, abolish prisons, listen, we can talk about reform. We can talk about human rights. We can talk about solitary confinement. I'm there, but I'm not willing to talk about abolishing prisons altogether. I'm not willing to talk about that, because you don't know who's there. You don't understand what the system is protecting us from, right? They're pretty good about making it seem like monsters don't exist, but monsters do exist, and you should check under your bed, as recently was found when a mother went into her room of her, 12-year-old daughter, and there was a man under her daughter's bed and she shot him. Okay. You should check under the bed. Sometimes monsters are hiding under there. So yes, we need these tools. It was conservatives who created these tools in the first place. Going after a criminal, tracking, public surveillance, right? You have no right to privacy when you're in public on where you come and where you go. You're traveling in the public. People can observe you. The difference is the dragnet. That's a different issue. So, should we have flock cameras? Probably. Should they be on? Probably. Should they be always recording? Probably. Should we have safeguards so that they can't be queried for anything other than a warrant search? Probably. Right? We should probably figure out how to balance that. It's the appropriate immune response. So I hope that lawyers take, note of that and that they pursue it that way. The incorrect response is destruction of property, right? On January 6th, the gathering of people was the appropriate response. That was the redress of grievances and the right to assemble and protest. The breaking of windows and things like that was not right. Okay. That deserved a ticket, at least. If you broke a window, you broke a window. Okay. But oddly enough, in the J6 case, there were few people who were accused of breaking windows. Most window breakers somehow just were never identified. Good immune response. There's another immune response that's been happening. And again, Donald Trump brings this out. ABC News reports that Capital One says it closed Trump's bank accounts because they suspected him of money laundering. Isn't that interesting? So let's look at this here. Capital One says it closed hundreds of Trump's bank accounts in 2021 for anti-money laundering reasons. By Peter Charalombos. Capital One says it closed hundreds of bank accounts associated with President Donald Trump and his businesses in 2021 for, quote, anti-money laundering reasons. I wonder why they debanked me. According to recent court filing from the financial institution, Capital One disclosed the money laundering review for the first time in a motion to throw out the president's lawsuit against the bank over the closure of his business bank accounts, to which the Trump family has alleged was politically motivated and unlawful. While the bank did not accuse the Trump organization of money laundering, Capital One said the Trump accounts were closed after a months-long review by the bank's anti-money laundering team, not for political reasons as alleged by the president and his family. I cry foul. I don't believe Donald Trump was money laundering nothing. Okay. Tax avoidance, that's a cottage industry. Not paying taxes, that makes me smart. Okay. Tax evasion, lying on your taxes, different story. I don't believe Trump lied on his taxes. They got leaked. People reviewed them. I don't think anybody found lies. They found good tax strategy. I don't think they found lies. Okay. That's never been the case. The closures were the result of a months-long analysis. Lawyers for the bank said in a court filing on July 31st, Capital One never publicized the termination decision, nor its confidential internal process, giving rise to the closure, and it permitted plaintiffs several months and granted several extensions to find new banking services, which they did. They went to Bitcoin. Capital One's after the fact attempt to justify its debanking of Trump-related accounts is completely baseless. Following the events of January 6, 2021, Capital One manufactured a post hoc rationale by selectively resurrecting a handful of isolated transactions that had occurred years earlier and had never once been identified as a cause for concern. The lawsuit. So they basically spoofed it. That's all they did. They checked the box. Why are you closing this account and requesting they be debanked? Money laundering suspicion. Check. Okay, well, is there criminal referral? Is there nope, no, we just need a reason to close the account, and that's an easy box to check because he's money laundering, he's evading taxes. Oh, okay. So Capital One, there you go. Wells Fargo was Mighty Banker, by the way. Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs and a couple others, and had little accounts at. So, anyways, you got no right to bank. Okay. But it's an immune response. The fact that this is coming out is an immune response. And we have to be really careful. We have to be really careful. We have to actually go through the motions and do the things it's going to take our country back, take our political parties back, and make the government a reflection of we the people. We need to project our virtue onto the government, not by being blind to its malfeasance, but by instilling ourselves into it, by becoming a part of it. People on the left and right are all doing this. This is the Senate candidate. Let me
So you do support.
Excuse me. This is the Senate candidate up in Wisconsin. Her name is Francisca Hong, and she's actually doing pretty well in the polls, which is why she's making the news. And CNN asks her, she's a DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. It's hard for me to imagine these guys are going to go far in Wisconsin, but Madison and Milwaukee are pretty left-leaning. So anyway, she gets asked about one thing in specific. It's the packing the court. And again, right, it's an immune response. One side of the country wants to bend the system to its will. The other side wants to correct societal's ills and vices. Okay, so either way here, this is an immune response, but this is also the other side. This is why we, the good people, the conservatives, the principally based people, the peasants, the ones who have to live here with our neighbors, whether they agree with us on tax rate policy or not, have to live here. And making major changes to the system, like disrupting the Supreme Court, changes how power is used in the United States. A Supreme Court that has too many members on it means there's constantly new people putting in. And each Supreme Court justice, surprisingly, has a lot of power. They are assigned certain areas, and cases have to make it past their desk before it gets to the other justice's desk, believe it or not. So there's kind of a tier to how things make it into the Supreme Court. So packing the court would have huge impacts, and it would really, truly make the judges pretty much political pawns.
So you do support the Senate, the Supreme Court, and prisons, the existence of prisons.
Yes, I support all those things right now that are helping to ensure that there is public safety. But I do believe right now in our Supreme Court that we should be working to expand the court.
So you do support.
Well, they want us to expand the court. This is a major shakeup. It's good that it's being said. Why is CNN asking this? Why is CNN asking this? And the way she's asking it is kind of straight down the middle. The reason she's asking that is because it's not popular. It's not popular at all. Okay. And I am starting to think that the Democrats don't want the Democrats to win. They don't want the DSA to win, right? So they want to expose them on all those weak spots. Things like packing the court, that's a weak spot. Things like having anti-law and order policies, that's a weak spot, right? Our vision of America is not include one where there's no law enforcement and ipso facto no crime. It's the other way around. Criminals are in jail. Real criminals are in jail. We expect real criminals to go to jail and innocent people to be protected. We believe that's the proper role of government. When we don't see that happening, that's the immune response. So the politicians that believe that, they're being flushed to the surface. That's a good thing. One of the other things I've mentioned on this podcast, and a couple months ago, we played a clip, and I've had multiple people mention this to me as being an impactful moment. And that was the psychiatrist that talked about men and women's response to a test they do. And it's punishing cheaters. And what it had a game, some kind of game that was being played, and they had men and women observing the game. And the observers could easily tell that one of the game players was cheating. And as the game went on, eventually the cheater got caught. And when they surveyed the people, when the person was cheating and he was cheating the other people, everybody, men and women, universally felt disgust and disdain towards the cheater. Universally. Okay. But the moment the cheater got caught and then the cheater got punished, the men who were in this study, and this study had been repeated many times, the men felt a sense of pleasure. They actually got dopamine and serotonin watching the cheater get his comeuppance, getting his just due. Whereas the women universally sympathized with the cheater when they became the oppressed, right? When the tables turned and the cheater got his just comeuppance, that same disdain they had for the cheater who was cheating the others, they now had for the others who had been cheating in the process of trying to get justice. They now felt bad for the cheater because now he was disadvantaged. Okay. That is a feminine way of thinking, right? And it's, when you think about biological terms, there's a reason for that. Moms want to defend their kids, even if their kids are in the wrong, you know, there's whatever, there's a reason for that. But men are more concerned with justice. And, you know, there's some psychological and biological reasons for that as well. I'm going to show you a clip of Dick Durbin on the Senate floor talking about Anthony Fauci. Now, keep in mind, Anthony Fauci has been up to his shenanigans for 40 plus years, from AIDS to pretty much every genetically modified virus, from Lyme disease on. Anthony Fauci had his fingers in it. Obviously, with COVID, he is neck deep in that sucker. And it's not just that he funded it behind the president's back and behind the, you know, system's back and the law's back. It's not just that. It's that then he turned around and lied to the American people about things like masking and social distancing. You know, he tried to break Republican states. He tried to get people to follow directions and don't think about your liberties. And now's not a time to say, I don't want to be told what to do. You know, all that stuff he did. Criminal. You know, he's responsible for potentially millions of people dying, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people's lives being disrupted. This man deserves, there is no crime that cannot be assigned to Anthony Fauci. Okay. He's guilty of it all. But the moment he gets his comeuppance, the moment he comes over under a moment of scrutiny, this is the most feminine thing you'll ever hear. Oh, don't criticize Anthony Fauci. He's a good man. He's put in so much public service. We should look past his crimes against humanity.
He is an example of American excellence, a brilliant scientific mind. And yet, the Republican Party has chosen to make this doctor, who saved countless lives, a political target. Last week, the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs subpoenaed Dr. Fauci in front of the Congress for a hearing with the express goal of humiliating and vilifying him. For nearly 3 hours, my Republican colleagues berated, cursed, and insulted a man who has dedicated his life to protecting the health of American families. This behavior is below the dignity of the Senate. Put simply, it was an embarrassment. If my colleagues had genuine concern for America's public health, they would turn their attention instead to the destruction wrought by this administration's anti-science agenda. But my Republican Senate colleagues have chosen to ignore real life and death issues to relitigate COVID conspiracy theories, not in an effort to learn what might have gone wrong or how to prepare for the next pandemic, but instead to try and tear down a man who's devoted his entire life to lifting others up. Dr. Fauci deserves an apology for the way he was treated by my colleagues, and the American people deserve better than the pitiful display we saw in the Senate last.
So if you believe COVID originated in a wet market, and if you believe it wasn't a result of gene modification, and if you believe that social distancing was the right play, and if you believe school shutdowns were the right thing to do, and if you believe that double and triple masks were okay, and even being masked up in your car, and if you believe, he worked so hard, he saved millions of lives. He didn't save a single life. He cost millions of lives. There was no net gain there. Okay. He wasn't between a rock and a hard place. No. He took the cover up route. He took the, we don't want people to see what we're doing, no matter the consequences. That is the most feminine thing. Well, now that Anthony Fauci is being attacked and now that he's being picked on, oh, woe is him. It's classic, right? It's nothing wrong with being feminine. I love my wife. I love how feminine she is and stuff like that. But even she has commented on that and gone, yeah, I feel the emotion. Now that it's pointed out, now I can see it. And it's like, yeah, don't let that emotion be weaponized, right? Of course we feel bad when people are being slighted. Of course we love the underdog. But be careful. Not everybody's an underdog. Some people are getting their comeuppance, right? Don't feel bad for the bully when he gets punched in the mouth. Don't feel bad for the bully, right? That's the point there. Don't feel bad for the bully. So yeah, Dick Durbin, whew, gotta love that guy. At least he is a well-spoken idiot. So speaking of another well-spoken idiot, you've got Bernie Sanders out there, right? So Bernie Sanders obviously has been one of the most popular socialist Democrats that have been out there. And so Bill O'Reilly was talking about Bernie Sanders just being a straight up communist. And I love this so much because, you know, there's always critics of Bernie, but more and more, it's starting to just be the label that sticks, right? Communism is not popular except for in a very little niche, narrow 10, 15, 20% of like highly educated social science college graduates, you know, have kind of been indoctrinated. It's not popular. It doesn't work. Okay. So the fact that guys like Bernie Sanders are now getting the label communist and it's starting to stick, I like it.
Bernie Sanders is a dangerous man. He's dangerous. He is a full-fledged communist totalitarian. So he's running around, and his headline in his speeches was that the government, the Democratic Party, will control, child care. Now, I went to China a year ago. The Chinese government controls child care. Parents don't have much say in how their children are raised. They don't. The children go to school, they do what the government tells them to do. That is what Bernie Sanders wants to impose on the United States. He'll never come out and say it clearly. But the big, giant totalitarian state is what Sanders and his crew want.
Okay. So when we talk about things like flock cameras, the fear isn't flock cameras in the hands of good, principled, ethical, conservative leaders. The fear is flock cameras in the hands of communists that want a totalitarian state. And that's what makes guys like Bernie Sanders dangerous. Right. What makes guys like Bernie Sanders and some of these people dangerous is things like, oh, we want free pre-K education. Let's take your kids out of the home and let's indoctrinate them. Right. It leads to that, which then leads to compelled acquiescence through indoctrination over time to more and more turning over of your rights and converting them into privileges kind of thing. That's what goes on. Dangerous stuff. But yeah, I'm so glad that it's just more and more becoming openly discussed. These topics are important, man. So another thing also happened over the weekend was there was do you remember the reflecting pool at the Washington Memorial? And Trump drained it, relined it with like a blue liner and painted, or I don't know, liner blue. I guess it was a liner. I thought it was painted, but I guess it was a liner, and it's got a liner on it and it looked great. And then people put algae in it. It was actually, people did put stuff that created the algae bloom. And so there's been like lots of vandalism. Some people burned in 8647 into the yard, into the grass. I mean, it's just, again, it's just obnoxious. It kind of doesn't serve anybody other than just a thorn kind of thing. And it's a nice 5-minute news piece. Well, Jeanine Shapiro had arrested the people who cut into this membrane. And over the weekend, she had to drop the case. She had to drop the case because basically they weren't the cause of the damage, or however it was written in the case. So the behind the scenes is the contractor had some warranty issues. So the contractor needed to fix a couple things, and the reflecting pool was leaking a little bit. Now, this was an under warranty, gonna get fixed, not a problem kind of thing. It's just part of the gig. You know, you build a big project like that, you're going to have some callbacks. So because of that, however, because it had to be fixed anyways, when these people cut into it, and it's all on camera, Trump posted the surveillance video of them cutting into this liner. Okay. Because it had to be fixed anyways, they couldn't make the argument that they had done damage. It was already damaged. And this actually came up in a J6 case where there was a broken window and one defendant pled guilty to breaking the window, and another defendant came and, you know, like pushed out a piece of glass in the window or something, make it more safe. I don't know, something like that. And they couldn't charge them with breaking the window or anything because the charge had already been taken and the window was already broken and you can't break it twice. So it's kind of the same thing. If the contractor broke it, no vandal can technically break it. So I don't know why they didn't have other charges. I have no idea. But Trump became livid that Jeanine Shapiro had dropped this case. He called her weak, said she waffled.
And I was disappointed with Jeanine Pirro, really disappointed with Jeanine Pirro. She folded like an umbrella, and people get away with things, and it's a disgrace. But we're very proud of Lafayette Park. Now we have a big decision to make. Do we take the pavers that are red, the red brick pavers, and do we change them into a granite?
So he was really disappointed with Jeanine Shapiro. He went on and he continued to talk about this. And in the opening clip, I played Trump telling someone, "You're fake news." This is the end of that clip. And he goes on to talk about kind of why she folded. There was a judge who basically took that little legal principle I just explained to you. It was already going to be fixed. So the damage the vandals caused didn't cause monetary damage because it would have, their damage was going to be fixed anyways before, with or without the damage. So that's the reason. And apparently some judge put Jeanine Pirro on the spot about this.
And I guess she choked. I don't know what the hell happened.
Are you reconsidering her role?
I don't know what you're fake news. Don't ever talk again. You're fake news. One of the worst in the business. Fortunately, nobody watches you. But something happened. There was vandalism there. And there was some things from the contractor which we would fix. But it's almost complete. And when it opens, it's incredible. It's really incredible. But remember this, it leaked from 1922. It opened in 1922. They never solved the leak problem because it was stone. And the cracks with the stone, stone is really not a waterproofing material. We essentially use a very high grade swimming pool type material, which was my idea. I was very proud of that idea. By the way, I didn't know the contractor. Everyone said the contractor. I didn't know the contractor. But when it was completed, it was perfect. But then somebody went in and cut it, just like they did the grass. Nobody talks about the grass. The grass have helicopter pictures of what they did. Wasn't it 87? Right? You know what they did, right? Did you see what they did? Did you see what
they put 8647 in the grass? So it was the same people, all right? So he's like, "How did you drop this case?" Very disappointed in Jeanine Pirro. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Apparently, she was seen leaving the White House yesterday with like a roller bin full of documents of some sort. Who knows what the documents are? All kinds of, speculation on that. Flock cameras got Brian Coburg. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, Brian Coburg was the killer up in Moscow. Traveled from Washington into Idaho and killed some students in a dorm of some sort. Yeah, exactly. Flock. If your kid's missing or there's a murder, your car's stolen, use every means possible to find it. Right? You're not going to say, but don't use the flock cameras and don't do any kind of geocaching or geofencing. No. Of course, we want all the tools, just like the Supreme Court said. Law enforcement efficiency has never been our concern. Like, be as efficient as you can. But yeah, dragnet surveillance. Okay, well, let's put the flock cameras up, but let's have, really hard processes to access that information. But unfortunately, our flock cameras are just public access, and they get queried. So again, it's the weaponization problem. We need to fix that. We need to get the people out of government that would otherwise weaponize it and hold those who do weaponize it big time, accountable for that. So very, very interesting. So there was another thing that also happened over the weekend. Obviously, with this Iran situation, we've been on again, off again, on again, off again. Oh my gosh. Last night, I went to the Republican Party meeting in my local county, and this guy got up and he started talking about Trump betrayed us and Iran and unpopular war. And oh my gosh, everybody was rolling their eyes. This guy's the most uninformed, all for the religion of Israel. I was like, oh, this guy, he's got to get off Reddit. He's got to get off Reddit, man. It's like, oh my goodness, it's horrible. But, we have been on and off again. Now, remember, This war is being fought on the ground. It's mostly being fought in the air, but it's being fought on the ground and from the ocean, but it's also being fought in cyberspace and over information space. So there's a lot of misinformation and stuff like that that's going on. And of course, the Trump administrations, we're in an active war conflict, right? I mean, there's like lives at stake. And so what's been going on is there's been leaking, and the leaking has led to Iran having preemption on certain, attack plans and things like that. This is a huge problem. Trump addressed this in his Oval Office meeting.
Mr. President, this is at least the fifth time you've turned off airstrikes against Iran since April to negotiate. What is your message to the American people who are wondering what has changed this time? Why should it be today?
Well, you don't know. I don't know. I think we're going to maybe get something, but I want to give them every last chance before decapitation. Very tough to do what we have planned, still planned. We'll see what happens, but it's a very, very tough thing to do. I think I'm very proud of the fact that I'll give people a chance. This is a big move. To do an attack that big on a country, I'd rather not do it. Now, we've already, through lots of large attacks, but they were normal large. Hopefully they'll come to their senses, because what happened cannot have a nuclear weapon, but hopefully they'll come to their senses. So they called me and they said, please don't attack, we'll make a deal. That's the real truth. And everyone knows it. And who wouldn't call? And they found out through leaks and sleazebags, a lot of sleazebags, leakers. Leakers should be put in jail. They have to strengthen up the laws for leakers. But in this case, leakers helped because they said the severity of the attack, and Iran knew it. They knew what was coming. It was going to come last night, and it would have gone on for a long time, and there'd be essentially very little left. There'd be nothing left. And if I'm given a chance to let a lot of people live, I want to give that chance. So I'm under no time constraint. I don't happen to be running, but a lot of very good Republicans are running. And you have a sick ideology taking place right now.
You have a sick ideology taking place right now. And he goes on to reference, Iran's ideology. And he's right. He's right. He's directionally right on what's going on in Iran. And the leakers, it's bad. But in this case, it's like, it saved some lives. Yeah, it saved some lives. But it also could have just kicked the can down the road. So we'll see, right? On and off. This war is being fought over the airwaves and over cyberspace, as well as, from the water and through the air with missiles. So there's a fog of war going on. There's a propaganda campaign coming from the left and right. Trump goes on to say that, they'll spend 8 hours in a conference room talking with us, negotiating, top level negotiators, totally connected with top tier leadership. And then they'll get on the news and be like, we're not negotiating with Americans. We would never negotiate with the Americans. Everybody's trying to write history before it takes place. Everybody's trying to position themselves so if they prevail in the conflict, they can go back and look and say, look how we prevailed over the oppressor. Whether it's our side or their side, both regimes have to look forward to trying to win and crafting a narrative in the process to make sure the bad guys were always the bad guys and they're always the good guys. A year ago, Ron made us watch a little clip, are we the baddies? It's like the soldiers that are wearing skull and crossbones. Usually skull and crossbones is what the baddies are wearing. Are we the baddies? I thought we were the good guys. Are we the baddies? Look at what we're doing. Yeah, exactly. So very interesting. Now in Iran, there's this is Trey Yanks. He was on with Fox and Friends this morning, and he was being asked about kind of the high level diplomacy back and forth, the leaks. So let's get an update on Iran.
Quickly, the president talked about the military operation that was leaked over the weekend. It's obviously, they need to figure out who's leaking from the White House. That has to be someone high within government that put that out there to sources. It's our job as the press to cover that. But I'm curious from your perspective and your sources on the state of play that leak played out in the Middle East, and who then phoned the White House to get to the negotiating table?
It's a great question, because these leaks can be substantial. And when you're looking at a situation with 50,000 U.S. service members, destroyers, refuelers, fighter jets across the region, the operational security is very significant. whenever there are plans being made to strike Iran. And the president indicated he called off the planned strikes at the request not only of Iran, but also of Gulf allies like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. What was interesting, though, Lawrence, we spoke with senior Israeli intelligence officials over the weekend who said they weren't even aware of the details of the plan. And that's how close the administration was holding these details to the chest because of how sensitive it is in the region. And so moving forward, we do anticipate the Trump administration will do everything possible to ensure that they're not giving Iran a heads up. They want to keep the Iranians guessing as these diplomatic pathways play out, understanding that if the talks fail, we are likely looking at a return to combat operations.
So if the talks fail, get back on the screen there. So if the talks fail, we return to combat operations. Obviously, this is, like you said, the 5th time they've done this on and off again. But Trump's right? In his speeches, listen, if I can avoid killing people, I will. If I have to give them 3 more days, I'm not giving them 3 more years. Right? Well, this isn't Vietnam. It was this guy yesterday. And fair enough. He might have misspoke. He might have meant Venezuela, but he said, what are we doing in Iran? This isn't a quick strategic strike like Iraq. And literally, like in the back row where I was at, we all looked at each other like, in Iraq, a quick strategic. What is he talking about? Like Iraq. We're there for 20 years. It's like, do you have no memory? I think that's actually a symptom of kind of waking up, and all of a sudden it's like a fire hose. I remember when I was in college, I was like, the war in Iran, oh my God. And I was in the ROTC. I'm like, this is crazy. And I was just like, this, if everybody knew, there'd be martial law. We'd be taking over the government. Guys, hello, tell as old as time. Like, it's practically a biblical, the conflict between the people and their governments. Okay. It's always going to be the case. So it's like a symptom of waking up. You have to have a little bit of strategic patience. That's one thing that's been really good about Donald Trump is he played the game long enough, right? And he's climbed up and he's been an absolute, champion. Now, Scott Bessent was on with CNBC and he was talking about this Iraq conflict. Because remember, the Treasury Department in this Iraq conflict has been every bit as important as the Department of War, right? I mean, it has been another attack front. They've gone after banking, all of their cryptocurrencies, their wire transfers. They've seized funds. They've, sanctioned other countries that are doing business with Iran. I mean, it's all out financial warfare and utilization of the dollar's status as reserve currency as a weapon. Unfortunately, everything you see them doing to the mullahs, they can do to you. They can do to the Canadian truckers. They can do to everybody, right? So we should take note of these tools and what they're doing, because if you get on their list, they're coming for you, debanking, et cetera, et cetera. But this is Scott Bessent saying there might be a deal. It's not the first time we've heard it, but, Scott Bessent, as they say, is a steady hand at the till.
Energy price. Japan is a substantial importer of energy from the Gulf.
The other thing, too, and this transitions. So Iran, right, is causing oil pressure because the Strait of Hormuz and all the delivery. And the Japanese bond market is being rocked right now, just absolutely rocked. Argentina was being rocked. We did a currency swap that allowed them to stabilize, and then we actually made some money. So we did a similar type of currency swap with Japan. Some people call it a Japanese bailout. We literally just bailed out the Japanese economy. I know. Do you think that this is going to have some impact on us? It just might, just a little bit. But they're talking about it like it's, a swap, an investment. Let's dive into this a little bit, because this is all tied into this bigger narrative. Donald Trump's promise was to return the United States of America to the people. That was his promise, right? To restore the republic. Now, to sovereign citizens and people like that, restore the republic means something completely different than what I believe he meant. What I simply believe he meant was government be accountable to the people. You're in a democracy. You're in a third constitutional order, right? It's whatever this government is, but the power needs to belong to the people. The parents who attend school board meetings, the community members who attend county and county commissioner meetings, right? It belongs to you. That's the promise that Donald Trump made. And so there's a lot of vectors to take our country back. You have to take banking back. You have to take back national defense. You have to take back the judicial system and law and order. You have to take back education. You have to take back health. You have to roll back regulation. There's a lot of things that have to happen. Okay. And one of the primary things that we connect the dots all the time, especially when we start talking about Bitcoin, which we're not going to do today. Okay. one of the things we start talking about is the financial system at large, the entire thing, the dollar reserve currency, the petrodollar, as you call it, the financial system that is drawn on British banking that put the United States at the center of it after Bretton Woods post World War II. That banking system creates debt slavery. End of story. It is a colonial system. It converts labor slavery and chattel slavery to debt slavery. That's all it does. You still have to get up, go to work every day, punch your clock, do your 8 hours. They just give you a little bit more autonomy and your time off. That's it. But you're still a slave to what? Your debts, your death note, your mortgage, your bills, et cetera, et cetera. The entire monetization of the system prevents people from building true wealth, and it encourages short-term cash flow. Okay, that's the fiat system. That system is damaging to the people. So to restore the republic to the people, to make the country a reflection of her people, one of the things you have to do is you have to restore money to the people. So now we're talking about the Japanese model. The Japanese stock market, the American stock market, these are all intertied. They're intertied through the central banking networks that all kind of flow through London, Vatican, DC, New York. There's a whole hub there. It's way beyond the scope to get into great detail about that. But the fact that the United States bailed out Japan is a sign that the financial order is changing. And we've been told this time and time again by Scott Bessent. Scott Bessent literally said, we made up Bretton Woods, we can do a third Bretton Woods. And they're preparing to do that. So the Iran conflict, the Strait of Hormuz, the banking in Japan, the international monetary order, they all tie together.
Energy price. Japan is a substantial importer of energy price. Japan is a substantial importer of energy from the Gulf. And we've seen President Trump last week threatened what would have been one of the largest military campaigns, or the largest military campaign since World War II against the Iranians. And now because of that, we are in talks with the Iranians. And I think there is a chance we may have a deal today or tomorrow to open the strait and move towards a more normalized position in this conflict. And that's because their Air Force is wiped out, their Navy is wiped out, substantial portion of their missiles are wiped out. More importantly, their missile production capability is wiped out. So anything that happens in the Gulf will benefit Japan and indeed the rest of the world, Joe.
Just to clarify,
energy price.
So we bailed out Japan, right? Because energy price pressure, and we've been good allies, but we bailed out Japan, and he ties it in together with Iran, and they're buying oil from us. Okay. So now let's go into a little bit of analysis about exactly what it is that we bailed out and why. Now, again, not everybody has the same information when it comes to the big geopolitical picture. And as peasants, we have to raise our hand first and foremost and say, we only know what we know. We're only as good as the information we have. So if we haven't contemplated it, how can we account for it as a variable in our just direction? Because remember, the whole point is we have to live our lives. So to the extent that this stuff affects us, we want to see it coming so we can prepare, right? Best thing to do when the tsunami is heading your way is head uphill, okay? Go the opposite direction. So I want to be prepared for what's coming. So let's talk about the war in Iran, how it plays in geopolitically, specifically with this banking. We're going to listen to this analysis. It's excellent. And again, the reason I said we're only as good as the information we have, in my opinion, right, he doesn't necessarily have the upside. He's kind of got the everything's breaking and the crash is coming, but I think there's an upside. There's a plan in place to replace it. This is the good thing about having Trump in charge, is he's looking forward to the golden era versus the people that were in charge before, Barack Obama et al., where they were managing the decline. They had no 2.0. They had no other plan. It was get it to ashes, and then the Bolsheviks will run in and take over. That was their plan. Trump has a golden age plan, and we have a choice in this.
And they are desperately trying to mount a rescue of Japan, even to the extent of the old trick of letting CNN or someone film a note on the desk of Peasants as he's making a statement, and then it says, "Bail out Japan."
Right.
Look, I mean, it's so obvious message to the market. come on, get in there quickly, help me bail it out because, you know, I'm going to do that so you can front run it and you can make money on front running it. But I mean, the key giveaway about how dangerous this is was what was he using to bail out the yen, the Japanese yen? What was he using? He was using euros. He wasn't printing dollars to do it or selling dollars. He was selling euros to buy the yen to strengthen the currency. And that means that he's very worried that the dollar is very weak, that he has to use the euro to help support it. And I think he's very worried because if interest rates go up in Japan, big trouble for Japan, because many of the companies, a large portion, 14, 15%, I don't know what it is exactly, are zombie companies, that their profits don't cover the interest that they need to pay on their debt. I mean, it's in other countries it would be called being bankrupt, but they're called the zombie companies. They just don't have the money to pay. So if interest rates go up in Japan, bang, this is a major crisis in Japan, and therefore a major crisis in the bond market in America. The interest rates are already going up. I'm sure we'll see them going up further this morning, even though the markets, the usual algos have sort of reacted to Trump saying, oh no, the Iranians asked for talks, which they did not. And, you know, they were close to finalizing an agreement on Hormuz with Oman. Yes, for the further date right down the end of the line, when the war's finished and everything's agreed, then there'll be an agreement with Oman.
Yeah. So, but he's saying there, right? We stepped in to bail out the Japanese economy. We use euros because the dollar's weak. Again, my perspective is he's a little bit nihilist. Like the crash is coming. They can't stop it. We're in a quagmire. It's going to be bad. And it might be, right? The future is not determined by any stretch of the imagination. It could get bad. It could get really bad. And of course, it could get really bad at any moment for anybody, for any reason. Okay. But he's right there, right? He's right. The system is clearly showing signs of end stage collapse. And that's what I want to point out here is people on every side of the aisle are looking at this and they're going, you don't have enough money to pay your debts. At a certain point, the piper has to be paid, right? That's the whole thing here. At a certain point, when one debt can't be paid and another debt can't be paid and everything gets repossessed and rolls up, eventually the last note holder walks up to the Federal Reserve with all these notes and he goes, I want to redeem $1 gajillion. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, we only have 10% of that in the bank. Right? That's the end game here. It's bankruptcy for the banks and the system and the governments and everything. And eventually when their printed money no longer has value, it gets thrown on the street like waste paper. And so the crash is coming. I really enjoy Promethean Action. They do longer videos, but I think they're great context videos. And here's a shorter clip of one of the videos that was done recently. And there's Susan Kokandon, and I can't remember her name. She's going to say her name right at the beginning of this clip. And she's talking about how the system is collapsing and the reset is in. And the Promethean Action has followed the British banking system, the London banking system, and it's how it's a colonial system in contrast with the American system, which is a tariff system and a meritocracy. And so Trump is reinstituting the American system worldwide, right? Obviously, he's changed the way we as Americans are consumers, instituting the tariff regime and things like that. But he's also changing trade deals around the world. And Iran has been a problem for this. Remember, I have mentioned this. Iran has been the off-books balance sheet for the banking cartels. They can launder drugs, guns, money, people, all through Iran because it's off books. It's a sovereign nation. They can do that. Now, America's fought back with sanctions and stuff like that, but there's always a workaround. Well, Trump is eliminating the workarounds. Again, this is why the Treasury Department is so involved. So let's listen to Promethean Action describe how the end is in and the reset is coming.
Extensively, it functions as the premier money laundromat for the drug, weapons, and trafficking mafias that thrive on regional chaos. That is the system The mullahs are not an independent power. They are the current franchise holders of a British financial operation that has controlled Iran for 118 years. And the wars between Israel and the Arab states, between Sunni and Shia, between all the parties in the Middle East, these are managed conflicts designed to keep the region unstable so the financial architecture stays in place. So here's the question no one in the media is asking. Why now?
This is actually really important to understand. And this is something I learned in college, right? When it comes to the Middle East and it comes to resources, one of the things that a hegemon or a superpower can do is it can stir up domestic conflict wherever the resources are at. So if it's in the Middle East and you want oil, okay, you stir up conflict. You get the tribes and the locals fighting with each other, and then you come in and you can play both sides. You can pay for one when you don't like their policies. You pay for the other. You can play both sides against each other as long as you keep your oil fields, as long as you keep your contracts. The entire reason why the Ayatollah in the 1970s was overthrown through some alleged joint operation. This is Operation Ajax, if I'm not mistaken. Joint operation between MI6 and CIA. The Ayatollah was overthrown. Why? Because as Iran developed, as there was a little bit of money flowing in Iran from the excess of oil, BP kept most of the profits, but obviously some of the money made in the marketplace. As Iran developed, as they saw the Western world, they wanted to develop. Now, Ayatollah wanted to nationalize the oil fields. He wanted to take back the resource under their feet from the British who had essentially contracted it. And so the Ayatollah wanted to do that. Nope, can't let that happen. So swoop in Western intelligence firms, Operation Ajax, Ayatollah's overthrown, Shah's put in place. And then the Shah continued the same type of Ayatollah policies, but worse, and was oppressive to his people. And then thus entered the conflict. There's always been conflict over the dirt in the Middle East. Okay, always been. But it's definitely amped up with terrorism and the funding. I mean, if they don't have the money, they don't build bombs. It's really that simple. So what she's saying is absolutely correct here.
Not just because of the nuclear program, not just because of the missiles. The real answer is that Donald Trump has spent the last year systematically dismantling the British financial architecture in the Middle East, and the mullahs were the last obstacle. Look at what he's already done. Since Trump assumed office the second time, he secured over $2 trillion in Gulf sovereign wealth fund investments, money that used to sit in City of London banks. It's now committed to American manufacturing, energy, and AI infrastructure. He organized the Arab world and Israel into his board of peace, ending the carnage in Gaza and beginning to rebuild it. The president of Kazakhstan captured it perfectly when he called Trump's strategy peace through construction. Peace, in other words, through economic development.
The board of peace is widely expected to respond directly to new realities by reinforcing existing multilateral efforts. The world has never seen a move like this. It is absolutely unprecedented because, in essence, peace through construction is a very innovative concept or project.
Trump designated the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, cutting off the infrastructure the British have used to manipulate the region for nearly a century. He brought Egypt's el-Sisi, the man who actually defeated the Brotherhood, to the table as a central partner. He's working with Turkey and Qatar, countries that Netanyahu doesn't want involved, because this isn't Netanyahu's plan, it's Trump's plan. And think about what Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, said earlier in January, that 50% of his job involves national security. That's because the real war isn't kinetic, it's financial. It's about breaking the City of London's control over the flow of money in the Middle East. The only thing standing in the way of this entire new architecture was the Iranian regime, still pursuing a nuclear weapon, still pledging to destroy both Israel and the United States, still developing the ballistic missile capability to accomplish that, and still funding proxies from Lebanon to Yemen to make war. You cannot build a board of peace while the mullahs are arming for war. You cannot redirect $2 trillion in Gulf investment while Iran threatens to close the Strait of Hormuz. You cannot rebuild Gaza while Iranian proxies are rearming. That's why this happened, not because Trump is a warmonger, because the mullahs were the last piece on the British chessboard.
They were the last piece on the British chessboard. It's not because Trump just wants war, although I am concerned when he tells Lindsey Graham, I just like bombing people, right? I mean, there's always two sides of the story. He's not just that he wants war, it's that he really is trying to make good on his promise to return America to the people. Just like anything, if you're behind on your car payments and you can't make the interest, what do? They take your car. If you can't pay your mortgage, what do? They take your house, okay? If we can't pay our national debt, who do we owe it to? The answer is China, Europe, Japan, everybody else who's bought our debt, and they'll come to collect. This is a real problem. This is a real problem, okay? And then it puts us in a position where we now have to defend ourselves. And we don't have the moral standing. We don't have the contractual standing. We are in debt and we owe, and they're just coming to collect the collateral, our natural resources, right? Even potentially even your very house itself. And so this is very important because the United States government has certain debt obligations. We have a social safety net in this country that is huge. It is huge, and it includes healthcare for pretty much anybody who wants it, okay? It's not a right, like they say in some places or they advocate for, but it's readily available. Obamacare, the idea with Obamacare was if you couldn't qualify for private insurance, you could qualify for a nice Obamacare plan. And they would kind of, carve the plan up in such a way that it was good enough for everybody, but not good for anybody. And, good enough for everybody, but not good enough for anybody. And they kind of set it up in a way where it was going to mainly help, the disadvantaged Americans, people who really couldn't qualify or afford insurance otherwise. Again, intentions felt good. We saw the corruption. You see the bill. You see that it was not really a single payer system, which is the only possible way to make it first. But then, of course, that de-incentivizes any type of medical breakthroughs or anything like that. Long story. But when Obamacare was passed, there were safeguards put in place that made it so that it would only actually be used for the people in our nation who really needed it. Unfortunately, sorry, I took myself off stage. Unfortunately, what we see in actual practice is way more people are on Obamacare than should otherwise qualify. This is a bill that has to be paid, right? So while Trump is going out and he's correcting the British banking system, he also has to correct government spending.
Nonprofit health policy research group finds that 9.2 million adults, that's nearly half of those enrolled in Obamacare Medicaid expansion program, do not even meet the federal requirements to qualify. How did this happen and how do we know?
Half of the people on Obamacare and Medicaid don't qualify. Half. That's not just illegal immigrants. That's half of the people.
Connor Hansen live on Capitol Hill with more. Hi, Connor. Good morning.
Hi, Dana. Good morning. Well, this study says some of those people actually make too much money to qualify for this Medicaid expansion program, and others are getting these benefits even though they're here in the country illegally. Now, this study was put together by the Paragon Health Institute, which is run by a former advisor to President Trump. He's alleging widespread fraud here. He says more than 9 million people, as you mentioned, close to half of those using the Medicaid expansion program under Obamacare should not qualify. The report given to Fox Business ahead of a hearing here on Capitol Hill says pandemic-era policies supercharged the issue.
We compared Medicaid expansion enrollment by state to the total number of people who would be eligible for that coverage, have income below those thresholds by state, and found a massive problem.
According to the study, fraud in the program costs taxpayers $32 billion each year, and people who really do need regular Medicaid could be paying the price the most. The study says New York and California have some of the biggest problems, claiming up to 62% of people enrolled in California are not eligible, and the states might not even be incentivized to fix the issue.
California actually gets 9 times more funding for an expansion enrollee than a traditional enrollee. That is perverse. The federal government is effectively discriminating against the most vulnerable.
And Brian Blaze, who you just heard from, will be here on Capitol Hill tomorrow testifying to the Senate Budget Committee. He told me one of his recommendations will be to have stronger verification for anybody trying to enroll in Medicaid. Dana?
50% of people on Medicaid don't otherwise qualify. That's crazy. That's crazy. No wonder the whole system has to be fixed. It's become abusive, and it is leading our country into slavery. And this is how you become beholden to foreign interest, because you got to pay the foreign bill. And if the foreign bill can only get paid if you pass a certain policy or you rule against tariffs or whatever the case is, that's where it gets really messy. We have sold our sovereignty for a pot of porridge is what has happened. And hard things have to be done to correct that. Hard things have to be done. So unlike my friend at the local Republican meeting, who was super concerned about, Trump and Iran, and just, in my opinion, just not fully informed on the issues and down some rabbit holes that are unproductive, right? On the other hand, you have the Democrat Socialists of America that are running candidates that have literally advocated stuff as silly as abolishing Thanksgiving. And when confronted on it, can't even admit it and give us word salads.
You talked about your past positions that he keeps highlighting and, obviously likely would continue to do so before November should you win. One thing that they brought up as well was a post from you in 2021 where you said Americans should cancel Thanksgiving, should have done this in 1621. The post has been deleted. Republicans have been highlighting it. Do you still believe that Thanksgiving should be canceled?
I'm a chef, and one of the first meals that I made that was for the community when I was 16 was a Thanksgiving meal. I always think my hospitality background in owning a restaurant for 7-8 years, that bringing folks around the table to share conversation and build community is always a good thing. But Thanksgiving is also a time that's incredibly painful for many people in our community.
Who is it painful for?
And so I think I wanted to make sure that people understood that there are multiple views, but views can evolve. And the position that I'm running for right now, and I think my background as a chef, will actually help me become a better governor that's able to bring more people to the table.
Francesca Hong, thank you for joining us. We hope to have you back on, depending on how things go next week in your part.
She's going to get rid of Thanksgiving. That is a dangerous person. I think Bernie Sanders was bad. She's really bad. All right, guys, that's it for us today. We'll leave on a giggle. We'll talk to you guys again tomorrow. Don't forget to visit 1776live.us. Of course, leftbehindwithout.org. They're getting ready to do their big Christmas drive. They need some help for sure. And of course, don't forget to visit politicalremodel.com.